When you have a chance to go in the top 10 of the NFL draft, when in doubt, always declare because you never know what can happen if you go back for that senior season. Basically, what you really do, especially if your stock is as high as it probably could possibly be, you give evaluators another chance to go through your game footage for another season and really pick you apart. It's kind of like one of those things where they could have not enough footage, so a team may or may not be teased by you. They've got just enough to satiate them to kind of get an idea for you, but then they start to get too much, and then they start to get repetitive, and they start to overanalyze, and they tend to overthink things. Ask Matt Barkley how that goes. Frankly, years back, ask Matt Leinart how it goes. When you have a chance to go in the top 10, you do it. Especially if you think there's a chance of you going in the top 5 and maybe all the way to the first overall pick. So just like with Johnny Manziel, I completely support Teddy Bridgewater's decision to declare for the 2014 NFL Draft. It was time. There was no reason for him to go back to school for another year. And you see other quarterbacks, even though they were redshirt sophomores like Brett Hundley and Marcus Mariota, they may reap the benefits of going back to school for another year or might potentially lead to their games being overanalyzed and they might see their draft stocks fall heading into the 2015 NFL Draft. When I look at Teddy Bridgewater, I see a guy that on the surface, he has a lot of the tools that I would like to see out of a young franchise potential quarterback. His size is something that may concern some teams, I will grant you, because he's a guy that's maybe 6'2", if I'm being generous, maybe 200 pounds, and he's very slender, very lean built. So some teams might look at him and say that, hey, this guy, he could get crushed by opposing defenses, and he might have some trouble staying healthy, especially with his lower body. How can his lower body handle and absorb some of the blows that he's going to get at the NFL level? So those are going to be the concerns there. But I think this is a kid with good arm strength, really good arm strength. And in fact, I believe his arm strength is a little bit underrated. I wouldn't classify it as elite, but it's really not that far off. And if he gets into an NFL program where he sits there and is able to work out at an NFL level, if you will, and you get somebody to focus a little bit more on his arm strength, he could potentially become elite. He really has very good arm strength. That was one thing as I went through his games in 2013 that surprised me a little bit. I thought he had an okay arm, but nothing special. I was actually surprised at both his arm strength and his accuracy. Now, at moments with his accuracy, he could tend to, but you could say this maybe about any young quarterback. So again, this might be an example of nitpicking a little bit, but he has a tendency maybe to not hit the receiver in the ideal spot. Instead of maybe hitting them in stride, he hits them in the body or hits them behind where they have to make an athletic play just to make the catch instead of being able to make it in the normal flow of things. One thing that does hurt his accuracy a little bit and does sometimes sap just a tad bit of velocity off of his ball are his mechanics, in the sense that unlike Johnny Manziel, who just really doesn't use his legs at all and falls away from his throws, Teddy Bridgewater just really doesn't use his legs much at all, period. He stands there, but he doesn't really follow through. He doesn't really generate a lot of torque and a lot of power from his lower body. So when you see his mechanics and you see when he throws the ball, it kind of almost looks kind of Vince Youngish, if you know what I mean. It's here, it's in a good position, but then it kind of looks like a wrist flick. And that's because, to me, he doesn't use a lot of his lower body. And he could generate more velocity on the ball and easier velocity on the ball and also improve his accuracy, I think, if he got his lower body more involved in the throwing process to help complement what his upper body is doing. The throwing the football is not something as simple as the arm. It's about shoulder turn. It's about body positioning. It's about footwork. It's about using your lower body to generate torque and power. So that's something I think that an NFL quarterback coach is going to work on him with a little bit, is to improve his mechanics, especially the lower body portion. Sometimes also because he doesn't get his lower body involved, he tends to throw the ball. Sometimes he's good and he stays on top of it, and sometimes, to me, with that kind of wrist flicky style, he almost throws it kind of sidearm. So somebody that's only like 6'2", if that, if he's going to sit there in the pocket a lot at the NFL level and throw a lot of almost sidearm passes, that could potentially generate some trouble, especially with his ball's tendency sometimes when he doesn't really step into them to float a little bit. That's asking for trouble over the middle of the field in the NFL. Now, this is a guy that doesn't make a living scrambling, but at the NFL level, he does have the athleticism to be more of a weapon with his feet, and I think he's going to need to do that. There are certain quarterbacks that you see, like the Andrew Lucks and the Tannehills and the so on and so forth, even the Geno Smith when he was at West Virginia. These guys are really good athletes, but sometimes I think they get too caught up in the whole BS of trying to be pocket passers first. Hey, you know what? You need to move your team down the field however you can. And sometimes the best way to help yourself in the passing game is to establish yourself as a dual threat quarterback. And there were times where Bridgewater demonstrated good pocket presence to me during his 2013 season at Louisville. He showed the ability to step up when he needed to, shift left and shift right. But occasionally he would sit there and get kind of frozen when a rush would come at him, especially. It seemed like straight ahead. Instead of trying to sit there and roll out, or instead of trying to go ahead and just make a play with his feet, especially early on in the year, he would kind of sit there, and it seemed like he would almost freeze a little bit. It didn't happen all the time, but there were occasions where I did see that, where he felt like he was a little afraid, maybe, and he wasn't so willing to go make plays with his feet. But when he does move out of the pocket, does a really good job of throwing the ball on the move, both rolling out to his right and to his left. That particularly to me is more impressive, is when you can roll out against your body, be able to turn your shoulders and make a full football throw. And Bridgewater has the arm strength to do that. And sometimes I think, frankly, he demonstrates better mechanics and gets his body more involved when he does throw across his body, rolling to the left, than when he does standing up in the pocket. Durability shouldn't be a huge concern with him, although some teams are going to be concerned with it just because of his build. And I get that, but again, he could sit there and get into an NFL weight program and maybe put on 10 or 15 pounds of muscle, mostly hopefully in the lower body, and that should alleviate some of the concerns. It kind of concerns me when I see certain teams, like Bears general manager Phil Emery says he believes that a quarterback has to be 6'5" in order to be a franchise quarterback, because he has to be able to see over opposing offensive lines. Now, you say this, moron, and you just had a 5'10" quarterback win the Super Bowl in Russell Wilson. You play in a division with a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, who is maybe 6'2" at the very most, and you can't beat him. Your team can't beat him. He dominates you consistently. I mean, there are a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL that aren't 6'5" and 225 pounds, and nor do you necessarily need to be. It's about, can you make the throws? Can you stay poised and cool and calm, collective under pressure? Can you extend plays with your feet when you need to, whether they be within the pocket or the ability to scramble and open things up, or even pick up some yards with your feet? And Bridgewater can do a lot of those things. I really am a fan of Teddy Bridgewater. In terms of my overall grading scale, I've got all that information in the description box down below. The 9 categories of tangible things that I measure with this grading system, the prototype for each, and then the final grade for the player, and then their NFL comparison. When it comes to Teddy Bridgewater, I gave him an overall score of 70, which is 6 points higher than Johnny Manziel. Bridgewater's a little bigger. I think his arm's a little stronger. I think his accuracy is just a little bit better. I think he's got several things. His mobility obviously isn't as good, but I think his pocket presence is a little bit better. I think his mechanics are a little bit better. There are a lot of things that I like about Bridgewater, just a little bit more than Manziel. That does not mean that I'm here besmirching or begrudging Johnny Manziel. I think Manziel has the potential to be a franchise NFL quarterback just as much as he does a big-time NFL bust. I view Bridgewater with having a lot of that same potential to be a franchise NFL quarterback, a little bit more in a traditional mold, even though he still can make plays with his feet, and he needs to do more of that at the NFL level. But he's a guy I think that is a little bit of a safer choice at this moment. I really do. Now, in terms of NFL comparisons to him, I've seen comparisons to Sam Bradford, and I've seen comparisons to Aaron Rodgers, and some comparisons to Geno Smith. And at different points in times when I watched Bridgewater, I could see all of those attributes. I could see him being kind of like Geno Smith in the sense that people maybe underestimate his arm a little bit, but sometimes he's not as willing of a mobile quarterback as he needs to be. I could see the comparisons to Aaron Rodgers in terms of the way he throws the ball and his ability to move and throw the ball in similar size compared to what Rodgers was when he was coming out of Cal. I could see some of the Sam Bradford comparisons as well. Ultimately, I hate to sit there and compare Bridgewater to Geno Smith because I think he's better than Geno. I hate to compare him to Sam Bradford because Bridgewater can actually stay healthy, unlike Sam Bradford. And I hate to compare him to Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers is the best quarterback, in my opinion, in the National Football League when all things are taken into account. So in terms of my NFL comparison, I would say somebody like a Ryan Tannehill, a guy with a strong arm that people maybe sometimes underestimate the strength of his arm, a guy that is a good athlete, a really good athlete. In fact, at one point in time, Bridgewater maybe thought he needed to play wide receiver to get on the field. So he's a guy like Tannehill who played a couple of years of wide receiver at Texas A&M before he moved over to the quarterback position. Tannehill's bigger, yes, but I see a lot of similarities in their game, and I think it's going to be important for Bridgewater, to continue to get a little bit stronger, to work on his mechanics, utilizing his lower body a little bit more, and being a little bit more willing and able as an athlete to be able to create plays with his feet, both scrambling right and to the left and being able to extend plays and still make big time throws and picking up yards with his feet when he needs to. If I had a top 10 pick, I would feel very, very confident in taking a Teddy Bridgewater. Ignore all the bullshit. I feel very confident taking this kid in the top 10 based off of the measurables that I see. Again, I'm not taking into account intangibles or leadership or maturity or football intelligence or off the field stuff because for me, on the outside looking in, I don't have the chance to be able to observe all of that. If I did, I most definitely would grade all of that in. So with my grade, I've got him right at that fringe, Teddy Bridgewater, of being projected as a good NFL starter. Now, with some of those other things, I think the kid did demonstrate some better leadership at Louisville in 2013. I don't hear a lot of stuff about him off the field. That would actually probably bump him up the board a little bit for me. So, like I said, if I'm a team drafting in the top 10 that needs a quarterback, I've got to think very, very strongly about taking Teddy Bridgewater. I think this kid is the real deal, and he will be a franchise quarterback in the National Football League.